There we go. Hopefully everything's working like normal. I had to restart my phone just to make sure. Let me know if you hear any lag or anything. Cool. Um, so I was talking about the question you asked about how long I was in the music scene. How much of that did you catch before it started freaking out? Okay, gotcha. Um, so yeah, I played with that band for a while, and then, or well, for the sake of the archive, if anyone stumbles on these videos and watches all of them, the stream crashed, so we're starting back kind of midstream. Played with that band for a while, and then linked up with some other bands and did sort of like pickup gigs with like more traditional like roots country bands because they paid better. Worked in like dance halls and things like that, so we saw a lot of wild stuff. Um, and then I was doing kind of odd jobs here and there between gigs and tours, and I met this guy at sort of like it was like a church basement coffee shop thing, and he mentioned that he needed either a new drummer or a new bass player, kind of jokingly, like on the mic. And afterwards, I went up and said, "Are you really looking for a new drummer?" Thinking I would play drums with him. And he said yes, and then we ended up hanging out and like trading songs back and forth, like because I play guitar as well, and so we were just kind of like hanging out until they kicked us out of the venue. And a few weeks later, he came through, and I tried out on drums and kind of embarrassed myself because he was into like more like Americana type stuff. And at the time, I'd been playing harder music and old country, and so it just was all over the place. Linked up with him. Their drummer stayed in the band, and then they needed a bass player. And so I went and bought a bass and an amp and learned his entire catalog in a week. And then toured with him and the drummer for 3 years. And that was like over 200 dates a year. So like closer to like 225 to 250 dates. And pretty much from that point on, I never stopped touring unless it was for like little short stints. And that was so like all in all, I toured consistently from 2003 to 2016. If I wasn't on tour as a player, I was tour managing or documenting, so like taking photos and videos. Um, I did a couple runs with random bands doing projection and selling merch and things like that. Hi, Kendra. Um, and then 2016 took a break when we had our kid, and kind of moved around a little bit and did like session work and played with random people. And I do like licensing and commercial stuff for film, TV, and commercial placements. That's kind of what like most people that know the music that I was involved in, they mostly know me from two bands. The one that I mentioned that we toured a lot, like when I was really young, and then the last one that I was in before I went to do solo stuff. And so we did like a lot of commercial placements and, kind of learned the ropes with him. Um, but in 2019, he and I started talking again. Kind of had like a little falling out, and then like patched everything up and started recording and playing. And then we're like hollering at booking agents and trying to piece things back together, and got like a new bass player, and we're pretty much firing up the engine to go. And then we played a double header show where we played this private F1 party for ESPN, and then we played qualifying day at Coda in Austin for F1. And then like 15 days later, everything shut down because of the pandemic. And so that kind of went out the window because we couldn't book or play anywhere. So we just recorded a bunch over that time. And then when things started kicking back off, we did like a little reunion show for our old licensing guy. It's like a guy who got a lot of good like commercial placements and things like that. And the band played his wedding years and years ago, and they were having a sort of a party for like his wedding anniversary and his company's like 10-year anniversary or something like that. And he asked if our band would get back together and play that. And so we did, but we didn't, like, we lost. We were kind of like Spinal Tap for bass players. Like, instead of the drummer, we just couldn't keep a bass player. We went through a lot of people. And our singer's wife learned everything on keys and kind of filled that gap for us. And then everyone kept telling us we have to, like, chase that down and do that again. And it's kind of like everyone kind of felt like that was the next obvious move. And then on the way back from that show that night, he asked if I'd play electronic drums for him and his wife, who play like electronic dance music now. And I said no. And that is the last, I'm trying to think, I'm pretty sure that's the last show I played. And then I ended up tour managing and documenting for them for one longer tour almost 2 years ago when they were opening for a bigger band. And then I did another one where they were opening for a band that I really didn't like and didn't enjoy either of those tours. And then I just decided that if I ever do anything else again, it's going to be on my terms, like my music, or, you know, working with people that I feel like are on the same page. There's a bit of, I don't know if you've ever seen Almost Famous, but there's a thing in there where Russell, who's played by, oh man, now I'm blanking on his name, Billy Crudup, and he's telling the reporter, basically the guy who's Cameron Crowe in real life, telling him, he's like, look, man, I outpaced these guys years ago. Like, I'm playing with them because I'm old friends with them. And he was like, I can't leave my friends hanging, but I also can't get any better playing with them. And like, not in a big-headed way, I just feel like that's kind of where I was with that band. Like, they were permanently in a rut of playing the same old, and then their idea of changing it up was like pretending to be different people in a different band and a different style altogether instead of improving on what we did. So I just felt like it's probably time to just go separate ways. And he's sort of like, I don't know, I don't want to speak disparagingly, but aside from being really vastly different creatively, he's kind of a control freak, and I don't know, too experienced to be around that, because I can't be quiet when I know better on a lot of different things, whether it's business or creative. So I know that sounds probably somewhat negative, but it's just the reality of the situation. Like, that wasn't my first successful band, and I was lucky to be in a lot of the bands that I played with and work with, and I'm very aware of all that. But I don't know, I think like the sign of someone maturing is recognizing when you no longer want to chase somebody else's goals. And like, I really wanted to do things more on my own terms. It says, have you ever drawn Goku? No, I don't really draw stuff like that. I draw things that I'm into personally, or actors or musicians, things like that. Let's see, you said, what a fun music career, so much to hear about, or so fun to hear about it all. Love music, especially live music. Never been a musician, but I'm involved with the industry as far as I can. Yeah, I mean, it's not lost on me how cool it was. Like, I got to go overseas with bands. I was like working with a lot of bands that had like really good setups. So it was really cool to have that perspective, and it really allowed me to hone the craft of like, you know, like photography and sort of crisis management skills, because if there's anything that you experience the most as a traveling musician, it's people freaking out. Like you get in these vans and drive sometimes 24 hours at a time, you know, like we had shows where we'd play a showcase in LA and then we'd get a really cool show offer and they're like, by the way, it's in South Carolina. I'm like, when? In 2 days? And we'd play the showcase in LA, literally get in the van and then take shifts driving all the way there. Can you draw me a very quick smiley face? Yeah. I was kind of kidding with the mouth there, but maybe this guy has like Elvis hair. I don't know if that's what you had in mind, but here, let's do a real mouth. There you go. Quick smiling face instead of just a traditional smiley face. Only because you've been in here a bunch of times, Bossatron. Let's see, Travis, you said, I have a part-time job at a local venue. Tomorrow I get to do load in and out for Bellamy Brothers. Oh, right on. Yeah. I mean, that's like, you probably would have been who I interfaced with on tour managing gigs, you know, because I would be the one doing all that stuff. And honestly, like if you're interested in the music industry, doing jobs like that is a good way to get into it if you want to travel. Mainly because when you do stuff like that, if you work well and you are like basically a smooth operator, like not freaking out, not tense, not mean or anything like that, a lot of the times bands will pick you up. Like you'll get sort of the nod of like, do you ever do this on the road? Or if you notice that bands are struggling with like someone who might not be a good tour manager or crew guy, it's always a good thing to pick someone up when you're seeing them work already. But yeah, I mean, it's something I think about all the time. Like we've been talking quite a bit on a personal side about relocating again, which makes me sad in some ways, but I'm at a point now where I'm I feel like we moved when it was still pandemic times, so I couldn't play any shows, and like that wasn't the only band that I was in, so like the shows that I did have set up for South by Southwest and all that pretty much all got canceled, which honestly, like one of the weirder ones was that Val Kilmer was actually supposed to host this show that we were playing, like a showcase, and we were in the top 3 in the billing on that, so we would have just been hanging out around him all day, and I didn't care about what we had to play. All I wanted to do was just talk to him for a minute, and that one got canceled and I was so upset. But yeah, being in the industry, I mean, really a lot of it is just being patient, sticking it out, you know, being calm, being chill it's what everyone's hoping they can find in terms of not just players but crew. So it's one of those things where if you're into it, that's a good way to get into it. But Bellamy Brothers, it's a good gig to work. What part of the country are you in? Hi, I can't pronounce your name, but thanks for dropping in. And before I get too sidetracked, I'm just about finished with this, so I'm going to start the next one soon, if anyone's wanting to see how I start these things. Oh, that's right, you said Minnesota the other day. Nice. Trying to remember if that's where we played. We did play like a nicer, older venue when we were there, but it depends on how long ago this was. We did a few tours where we got to play in some really cool venues. But yeah, especially like Midwest. I mean, like, I feel like a lot of people, that's like show going territory because you have like sports, you have restaurants, but you don't have. It's not like being in Austin where you have all kinds of stuff. You know, I feel like there's a deeper appreciation for music in general. Yeah, how big is Medina? Like, what's the capacity on that place? Let's see, Positron said, I've never played for people in my life. Back in grade school, me and my music teacher would practice piano during my lunch hour. Yeah, you should always, because that's an easy one to get into as well. Regardless of where you live, you can get like a weighted key piano, so you can even practice with headphones. But yes, music is good for you. Playing it, learning it. Like I play piano a little bit. I mean, I play keys mainly. Like the last band I was in, I played drums, keys, and sang at the same time. And honestly, a lot of what I miss about it is just playing. So it's very little to do with like the not necessarily the show aspect. It's just like I miss being in a practice space or in a studio, just kind of like playing around with stuff, you know, writing like a bass line on keys and playing drums to it. But I think it's about 600. Yeah, so that probably we would have been in one of those size venues. We may very well have been there because we went through on like a couple tours. We were a warm up band, so we typically were kind of like the tag along for bigger bands. So it was kind of cool because we got to play on some really fun stuff, like sort of like bucket list type things for every musician, like ZZ Top shows, Dwight Yoakam shows. We kind of rode the fence on like whether we were playing country or rock because we weren't either, or we weren't a country band at all, but some people kind of lumped us in there because we could play like sort of Americana type stuff. But yeah, funny story about that. We had this run where we did shows with Dwight Yoakam, and we worked up a whole set for a few weeks of sort of like countrified versions of our songs, and then we got on stage to sound check, and their sound guy Scotty, who's like one of my favorite people, said, "Man, we are so excited to have you guys here. We're so sick of hearing bad country bands. We want rock. We're gonna get these people whipped up." And we were like, "Oh, okay." And to like dust off our old set, it was kind of funny because we were just convinced they wanted us to play like more of a country style. But yeah, I mean, like, those were some of my favorite times in general in terms of being able to travel. And I was started out in a lot of those bands as like a hired player, so I was kind of traveling on someone else's dime and getting to eat food in different places, and you know, it was a fun way to see the country and some other places, and you know, do a little bit of overseas stuff. You know, it was like a, if you had the right perspective, it was great. I think tour is not for everybody because there's definitely people that would have like total flip outs on the road. And you know, I have a friend uh, who I think he kind of like didn't, I don't think he enjoyed being overseas. And he's one of my favorite guys, best musician, best voice ever. Sometimes he pops in here. But he was kind of having like a freak out, and one of our mutual friends who was the drummer was like, "Hey man, we're not that far from home. There's a KFC right down the road. Like, just go get chicken." It's like the most American like country thing ever. But yeah, people can kind of freak out on the road. It's interesting. Um, I always kind of liked it. My favorite thing was being in the van, listening to podcasts and audiobooks, and you know, some of my favorite tours, we would listen to audiobooks as a group, and we'd be in between songs. And I remember, I mean, this happened in a lot of bands, but in between songs, somebody would walk over and be like, "I can't wait to get into that next chapter. Like, let's play everything a little bit faster. Like, let's get out of here." So you start to really love it if you're suited for that lifestyle. But yeah, food, tickets, and beer. I mean, that's a big one. It was or like festivals were kind of my favorite. Like if I wasn't going show to show, I love a good festival, especially when you get all the cool credentials. Like when my wife was pregnant, we got to watch Tame Impala from side stage at ACL. I mean, like 10 feet from Kevin Parker. It was pretty cool. That was like when Dave Grohl had fallen off the stage and broken his foot. It was that year. And we were all standing side stage watching Tame Impala play. And a drummer from another band that I was friends with tapped me on the shoulder and nodded over, and Taylor Hawkins and Dave Grohl were like headbanging to Elephant, and they were like also about 10 feet from us. It was just kind of cool because we're all in this little side stage holding pen. But we got to see a lot of stuff. Some of my favorite music I saw live before I ever heard a recording of it, just being like having like an open pass to like everything. Especially with ACL, you get, if you have a full weekend artist pass, you can ride the shuttles and you get free food the whole time. So after we played our set, we would just go camp in the media tent and do as many interviews as we could, and then I'd get to like bring my wife along and like crush a bunch of local burgers and free drinks. And you know, that's where I met like Kurt Vile was another guy that I got to hang with that was like shockingly nice. I'd never heard his music really, and then have always been a fan since because he was just so sweet. And like ended up like we were side stage for Dwight's set at ACL that year as well, and Kurt played right before him. We played right before Kurt, and we ended up watching the show, and it was kind of one of those things where you're just in such like rarefied air because you're standing with either artists or artists' spouses or the photographers, and you get this really interesting vantage point. What did I play? So in that last band, I played drums, keys, and I sang, like all at the same time. So like if a song was in a swung timing, like not in 4/4, I don't know if any musicians are in here, but like in 6/8 or 3/4, I could play like organ and stuff with my left hand, and then I would play drums with my right hand, and then I sang backing vocals and like alternate sort of like trading off lead lines with the lead singer. But then in other bands I played bass and guitar. And then for recording stuff I've played a bunch of different things. I also play lap steel. But when I started on guitar and then realized everybody was a guitar player and everyone needed a good drummer. And really like you can have a halfway decent band and a great drummer and it makes it a pretty good like border on great band, you know, or you can have a great set of musicians and an awful drummer and it makes them sound terrible. So if you have good tempo and you like to practice, it's a good position to be in. But it helps also because I played so many other gigs on other instruments and recorded a lot on guitar and started there that I know how to not step on the other players when I'm playing drums. But it's a skill set that it's hard to acquire, and it requires also like taste is the fastest way to put it, but not like taste like good or bad, more so like understanding where you are in the group. So knowing certain people's tendencies live, or like he's like, you know, a good example, like I played with a guy who was left-handed but he played right-handed guitar, and so usually what that translates to is that they have inconsistent tempo. So half of the time when we would play shows, I knew that I had to lay back in the beat so he wouldn't speed us up. And if he ever started songs, I would always be counting with him. So like at a lot of shows, people would always ask me, why are you always clicking or counting your hi-hats? And it was a thing where it was, you know, in with the song, it wasn't like super loud, but it was because he floated tempo a lot. He also is a kind of singer that doesn't sing from the diaphragm, so he's always sharp or flat. And I'd have to kind of ride harmonies in a way where it sounded like we were off together, like it was intentional. So I'm a bit of a chameleon when it comes to that. But I didn't really like being a bass player because you're sort of like doing the least amount of work. You have to stand up the whole time. Like, not that I don't want to stand, but it's sort of, I'd rather be back behind like a drum kit, you know, sort of dictating tempos and things like that. But yeah, but that band, that band, like, they're still doing stuff, but it's really just the lead singer. And so it's one of those things where I think like a lot of people that were attached to it all kind of wish that it went differently, but we got really rocked in the pandemic, so we just kind of faded, and then the attempts to fire the engine back up all kind of backfired on us. But if anyone's curious, that band is called Leopold in His Fiction. I don't often offer that name up because it's one of those ones that I also wish had worked out a little smoother. But I don't know. It's one of the pitfalls of music, is that failure is inevitable at some point. But yeah, I'm working on my own stuff now. So when I'm not drawing or being a dad, I mean, I'm always being a dad, but when I'm not on duty, basically, I'm working on music as well. I have some stuff that's out. It's all kind of piecemeal because it's from over all the random years of having downtime to record. So it's sort of like listening to those now is like, well, I did this guitar in this house, and then we moved here, and I did the drums there. So it doesn't have a cohesive feeling like I would prefer. But I've got a bunch of stuff that's going to come out at the end of this year and then the beginning of next year. And then if we do relocate eventually, I will have a studio again, and so I'll have a lot more stuff. Thank you. But I still keep in touch with a lot of people. Like, I've almost gone out on the road a few times with Dylan LeBlanc. We just always are trying to like figure out how to make that work, since he's based out of Alabama and partly in Norway, and I'm out here. And so in the meantime, I've done music videos and a lot of photos for him. And occasionally I still get people that ask if I want to do sessions. There's a guy that I do sessions out here for, but I don't know, music is I'm at a point with it where I'm kind of, hi, how's it going? I'm kind of at a point where if it doesn't really make me want to like jump in full force, I'm not really wanting to do it. You know, it has to be sort of a loud yes instead of like, yeah, that could be fun. I know myself too well. I don't want to really get too involved. All right, so I'm going to move my iPad so I have a reference photo, and I'm going to call this one done. So I'm going to scoot it where the frame is hideous, and then I will start a new drawing. So that one is about as done as it's going to get. Just don't want to overwork it. So everyone take a look real quick. And then usually I don't say who I'm going to draw next. I'll let people guess as I'm drawing. So I'm probably going to do that as well. And then we can just see if anyone recognizes them. If anyone has suggestions for like actors or well-known people, thanks. Yeah, it's I wanted to keep it kind of like medium contrast on his beard, which I think it turned out relatively well. There's also glaring from the lights, so you're seeing sort of a reflective version of all of it. It's a little weird. While I'm thinking about who to draw next, because I haven't exactly picked them, let's go back through everyone in this series so far. So this is where it started. And pretty much all of these have been done with Blackwing pencils, the Blackwing 71s, which they feel more like a medium, even though they're marked extra firm. It's a pretty soft graphite. Keanu. I do have a reference photo of him back here. I'll have to look for it here in a second, but I'll scroll away, I'll look at this. So that's Tom Hardy. It's based on a Greg Williams photo. And that's just kind of him from several years ago. I think I may add him to the list. I don't know that I'll draw Keanu right now. Sacrilege, how I just pronounced his name. Quinoa. But I think, no, SpongeBob's not really my wheelhouse. I could definitely draw him, but he's kind of not in keeping with the style that I've been on. I think I've got one picked out. It's one I've drawn before. But I think everyone will appreciate him if those are the suggestions I'm getting. There's Joaquin. This is actually from a press tour, not from a roll. But that's, I think, my favorite one of this series so far. And again, he's got like reflective. It's from the graphite dust in his hair. And then Josh Brolin, which was pretty cool. The photographer that took this is Brian Bowen Smith. It's one of my favorite Leica photographers. He reposted this the other day and sent me a sweet little message. So that's always cool to see. He's been really encouraging in general. He's one of the guys that inspired me to get the camera that I use. This is Johnny Depp, also based on a Greg Williams photo. It's pretty reflective because there's a lot of graphite in his hair. This is from the set of Minamata when he had kind of a white wispy beard. And so it's kind of like a, I don't know, less common look for him. So it's not classic Johnny Depp, but I imagine he still sounds the same when he talks. It's Brad Pitt as Cliff Booth. That's from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm a big Tarantino fan, more so his films than listening to him talk, if anyone catches my drift. Sorry, the camera's going to shake just a little bit. I got to pull a power cable out of it. I wonder if anyone catches this reference, but I kind of devour film podcasts and interviews and things like that. And Tarantino, I heard them talking about him on a podcast, how he code switches. And when he's doing the Django Unchained press tour, he code switches really hard, where he talks in this sort of really rough accent. And I just wonder how the cast feels about that when it's, Kerry Washington and all these legendary people. They seem to be unbothered, but man, does it stick in my head when he does that. So that's Brad Pitt as Cliff Booth. And then Christian Bale, who I just finished. And that's also kind of like a medium grade contrast. I wanted to keep it a little bit lighter on that one just because it's a softer photo. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start. And I always warn people, this is the most boring part of the process. So you'll have to bear with me if you want to see it come to fruition. And if you don't have the patience to stick around for too long, then I time-lapse these when I'm finished. So push all the buttons or remember my name, I guess. See how long these pencils are by comparison. Yeah, I'm at the point now, I'll just show you. These are the black wings that I've used for this series. This is a normal length one over here. And that's just like, this one was for the first, I mean, basically they're in reverse order right now. Actually, this order, because I skipped over this pencil and over sharpened. But doing this style of art, you cut so much of the wood off of them when you sharpen them. So it really takes a lot out of them. So I need to get a black wing extender, which is square tipped. But until then, I just have to burn through all these things, which is kind of a shame because I like this series a lot. But I'm gonna empty this real quick, and then I'm gonna start this new one. I get the feeling anyone that's a fan of like John Wick or stuff along those lines, once they realize who I'm drawing, they'll like it. He's one of my favorite actors. I'll shut up so you can hear the pencil. All right, and this is like the classic black wing long tip. That's sort of what their whole style is. That's what that sharpener does. It cuts away all the wood and then gives you like a really fine point. But like I said, even though these are marked extra firm, they're really more of a medium, in my opinion. They're pretty soft graphite. Maybe it's just the difference in like the Japanese graphite scale, similar to how Japanese fountain pens are 2 grades finer than a German or American fountain pen. All right, bear with me for 1 second. Can I spin pencils? Not really. I can spin drumsticks, like, pretty rapidly. Mainly I don't spin pencils because I usually try to keep those fine edge, like, tips on them. And these things are so soft, it's like, I feel a little bit of my soul chipping away every time I accidentally break one, if you know what I mean. But I get that. I have a lot of pins that are kind of good for that. I can do the rubber pencil, but maybe not at this angle, you know, because it has to go down so you wouldn't see it. But yeah, this is the Frank Lloyd Wright series Blackwing, which I'm down. I found an extra one, which is this one, and then I think I have 3 more. So if anyone's really curious about these, I have a lot of opinions, but that's what they all look like. And they're cool. I kind of have like, I have a lot of opinions in terms of that company and how it's handled. Something I don't really like when there's less of a personal touch, and also like all this claim to being like a heritage brand when it's basically a new startup. But that box alone is, it's marked 32, but they're all 35 on their website, plus shipping. So for 12 pencils, it's a lot. Like I could do the same stuff with dollar bin pencils. But I do love the square eraser. It makes the grip really nice, especially when you're doing a long grip like that. So anyway, I'm gonna start drawing because I'm seeing that people are just disappearing as I talk. So, but also thanks for the few folks that are sticking around. What I'm gonna do, I'm essentially marking the very bottom of his nose. And then I'm gonna mark his eye line, or a rough approximation, and then essentially from the corners of the mouth. And these aren't exact, it's just kind of giving myself a guideline. in reference to my photo. And again, this is a slightly softer portrait compared to what I would normally use as a reference. If I had it my way, I would take these reference photos, but obviously I don't know any of these guys, so that's not going to happen. But a lot of the time, that is why I choose photos that are taken by photographers that shoot Leica or big, like raw photos like that, because I prefer to work off of something that's incredibly detailed, because that does always translate. But this photo in particular is just the best one that I could find with the angle and the contrast I was looking for. Right. And then I always say, you kind of have to bear with me here. These start out incredibly rough. And for folks like Bossatron and Travis, you guys have seen me draw this, I think, this stuff a few times, so I always say start rough. Make a rough sketch and then refine it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's the goal, is for him to be as detailed as possible when I finish. So then the other thing I do here is, once I get like some of the larger markers, I start to measure out different distances from the thing I've created, just to make sure it's in line with my reference. And for that, I always use this 6-inch automotive ruler. I prefer this because it's really flat and it's bendy, so it can go in my notebook. And a cool detail about this ruler, other than just that it's a good ruler for drawing, is that this is actually my grandfather's ruler, and he was a cartoonist a long time ago, which none of us knew until 10 years after he passed away. But he had a bunch of little cartoons in a bunch of random publications. And so when they cleared out all of his art supplies and his desk and stuff, I got a couple little cool keepsakes like that. But I pretty much carry that all over the place. Just one of the best rulers I've had. So you said the hardest part of any project is starting. The drawing I'm making for my niece, I spent a couple days just basically making the image in Photoshop first. Yeah, I remember you telling me about that the other day. It's true. It's with any creative process, it's always the hardest part is actually getting it started. It's the same when I did animation and music videos. I had to really embrace a process of making a really garbage version of something first, and then look at it as if almost like I was fixing somebody else's bad work. So it was here, I'll show that. Yeah, it keeps flagging people, which is all right. I don't mind. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is you gotta just commit to it. You know, it's just pencil and paper. But I think you were saying you're doing mixed media, so that's even trickier. But even then, I would always recommend just measuring it out and working in pencil first. You know, make it permanent after you get it how you want it to look. But yeah, some of my favorite projects that I've done were failures at first. I have a drawing that I did of Michael Fassbender either last year or earlier this year, and I thought I missed the mark on it. And it's funny because most people that I show that to think that that's like the best one in that series. It's just like a really heavily contrasted, simple pencil drawing, you know? There's little things on this I see that I already don't like, but that's why we're drawing in pencil. Oh, cool. Yeah, that's like Prismacolors or something like that. I feel like those are kind of the best for it. I feel like the shape of this guy's nose kind of gives it away a little bit, but I said that about Christian Bale after I drew a few features and nobody got it. This actor in general is someone that every time he pops up in something, with the exception of like one of the things he's most famous for, when he has smaller parts or he's in dramas, he's like one of those guys that makes me like feel teary-eyed. Like, I'm not ashamed to admit it. He's got a couple little small parts in a show that I really like. You said, so this is an actor, has something to do with John Wick, and is your favorite. So he's one of my favorite actors, not necessarily in like the action stuff he's done, but in terms of when he has good drama roles. He doesn't have anything to do with John Wick necessarily, but he's kind of known for roles that, or a role that's in that vein, kind of in that style. Which I think you'll understand what I mean. He's in like quite a few things where he's kind of playing that type of character. But I'd say like his best work is when he's in more dramatic stuff. He's also in one of my like other favorite movies that we've talked a little bit about before. And I'd say probably the least likable character in that movie. But does it so well that you almost like him for it. But he's in, I think, my favorite episode of any show in the last probably 5 years. Okay, cool, yeah. I feel like I'm giving stuff away, but the nose is the main one. The misshapen part of it. And no, it's not Owen Wilson. He is on the list, though. It's one of my other favorites, but completely different. I mean, I can keep giving hints if y'all want me to. Um, so I went on like a long rant about Taylor Sheridan the other day. He has been in, to my knowledge, 2 things that he's written, but never a big part. Always kind of an instrumental part, but not a big part. I don't know. I don't want to give away anything too much where you can look it up, I guess. You did hear Keanu Reeves, but it's not him. He's on the list, though. One of my favorite stories was about this actor in particular was having a disagreement with Stallone. He was on a film with him, and didn't have anything going on, and one of his kids was being born, and so he flew, like his wife was in labor, and he flew back to LA, and was there for the birth of his son, I think. And then one of the producers and I think a PA for Stallone called him and said he wants you back at the gym. And he was like, well, I just landed at LAX. I can't. They're like, we don't care. He wants you back. You need to be here at the gym. And when he got back, the second that he walked up, Stallone was leaving and made a comment about how they wished that he was there that day. And then he went into the gym because he had already gone back, and there's this salve that he uses that is really rare and you have to go to a different country to get, and it was missing from his locker, and apparently Stallone had taken it, and he said that he didn't like him anyway, and so he went and confronted him in the parking lot. Which I feel like there's not a lot of actors that would be like that. So that's a pretty particular story. I feel like it gives it all away if you start using IMDb or Googling. But he also trained to be an actor in Russia at one of the same schools, or the same school that Elizabeth Olsen trained at. And he was a minor league baseball player in Russia. So it's sort of like a lot of overlap with all my interests. There you go. Yeah, I like it when people are trying to figure out who I'm talking about without having to Google it. Another funny story, he was in an acting class really early on, and he didn't know that everyone had to go around and say like an emotional story, and he didn't know what to do, and so he lied and said that his mother gave him his baseball glove before she died, and made everyone cry, and then he started crying, and then after the class his teacher came up and was like, don't ever lie to my class again. Like, his teacher saw right through him and knew that he was making it up. He also, in that same Russian school, not that any of these will give it away, it's just funny stories from him. In that same Russian school, he had to do something to make the entire class laugh, but he couldn't speak. And so he put on his girlfriend's yoga pants and walked on stage and pissed himself. Like a real testament to how committed he is. Let's see. It's a little like another small trivia thing. He literally wears the same boots in many shows and movies because they're boots that he wears in real life, because he can train in them as well as run around. They're like a sort of a high style military boot. He was shooting a show in Baltimore, which is another little giveaway. And there's a scene where there's a bunch of riot cops with shields, and they have to kind of go up against this protest, and people are throwing, you know, fake bricks and stuff like that, and they actually have like some real police in the group, and they're shooting in the middle of shooting the scene, and he sees a guy that he doesn't recognize that isn't a stuntman or an actor running full clip at him, and basically I think split his face open when he hit the actor, and he felt like, well, if this guy's gonna hit me, I'm gonna hit him back. And so he did, and then the guy ran off, and a bunch of real cops ran after him, and apparently he was running from the police anyway, and ran onto their set because it was filmed on the streets. Yeah, this guy's got like one of the greatest stories. Just one of the most like real guys out there. He also spends a lot of time in my wife's hometown, which she's from northern Louisiana. So, because a lot of people film out there, it's like one of the tax break states. He almost went to prison before his acting career took off. It was right before he got the gig that everyone kind of knew him for early on. He was sort of in a party neighborhood in the LA area, and he always has his dogs off leash, and he had one of his bulldogs, and this guy called the dog over, and he was petting him, and then he was holding him and not allowing the dog to go back to him, and he called him on it, and the guy had a bunch of friends come up, and he hit him so hard that he knocked the guy out, and he cracked his head on the sidewalk. And basically the cops, when they arrested him, told him if this guy didn't wake up, you're going to get charged for involuntary manslaughter. And he just said, you better hope that he wakes up. And then he sat in the holding cell for a long time, and then eventually the guy did wake up, and then they sued each other back and forth. But less than a year from that happening, he was on a really popular show, and he was only in the first season of it. That's another thing about him, is that he has really incredibly well-trained dogs, usually pit bulls, that are always off leash. Let's see, I can tell that I probably watch way too many interviews and things like that compared to most people, because I feel like if somebody told me even one of these stories, like, oh, I know who that is. We'll keep going. I can give more obvious hints if you want. He's acted, I'm trying to think. So not the last one that I did, but the one before that. So the last one I did was Christian Bale. The one before that was Brad Pitt. He's acted with him. In one of my favorite movies of both of theirs. Yeah, slightly more obvious. There you go. that's about as obvious as it gets. I mean, if I start giving too many hints, I feel like it's an obvious giveaway. I did already. I kind of named a podcast that he does. And I also mentioned northern Louisiana, which for anyone that doesn't know, that's basically Shreveport. I'm measuring the distance from the bottom of his nose to the corner of his eye. No guesses yet? And then I think I did it again where I made his nose slightly too tall. That's all right. That's kind of the point of showing this part of the process. So I'm going to bring this down just a touch, which is always a little bit painful. I hate it when you miss, but I did all that without measuring except for the width of his nostrils. He has been in some sort of superhero adjacent stuff, but isn't necessarily a superhero. But he does have scenes with a superhero. No, not Danny Trejo. But I could see that. I mean, like there's some criminal elements and things like that. So I think where I went off is I need to bring these more in. I met Danny Trejo years ago, and he was actually as cool as you'd want him to be. He was, I think, part of like a little sort of rap party thing. And it was at a bar near my house in Austin. And none of us knew that he didn't drink, and so we kept trying to buy him beers, and he said thank you a few times, and he was like, it's okay, it's okay. We kind of got brushed off by like a person that was like working for the production company, and then a little while later somebody sent over this tray of Tecates that was like 30 beers, and then we looked over and he just gave us like a cool like yeah, and then left. Like none of us knew that. I'm pretty sure he's sober, but a bunch of drunk young band guys that are like machete. So he was pretty sweet about it. I have many stories like that where it's just the random people you run into when you're in places where they film, especially Robert Rodriguez folks. I've got a friend who was in one of my bands. His name's Rob Franco, and he's in Sin City 2, which we all kind of have a running joke. If Rob ever ends up cast in something, he usually gets shot in the face, which also happened on 1923. He played like Giuseppe or something. He's like, where is Antonio? You know. Which if you ever watch the second Sin City, he's the one that I think Powers Booth clips at the poker table. That's my friend Rob. He was the lead singer of honestly, one of the worst bands I was ever in. No shade on Rob, but man, we were bad. Still nothing, but you have to go. Oh, right on. Sorry, man. I could give it away, but I just feel like I want to keep stringing out details, if that's all right. You'll see who it is for sure tomorrow when I post. Let's see. If anyone's still interested in guessing, I can keep going. Just want to double check so I don't do this like what I did on Christian Bale's nose. Okay, right on. oh, keep dropping hints. Let's see. These are the most random notes, but his cousin was the lead singer of Fountains of Wayne, who I had said before wrote and played all the music for That Thing You Do, which is one of the few music movies that shockingly holds up better than the average biopic. His brother is a surgeon in DC that he's talked about a lot and had on his podcast many times. Let's see. If y'all don't know that, that means you don't listen to that podcast, so I need to not give that as a hint. Mickey Rourke it's good for a few reasons. It's not him. But you got to remember, Mickey Rourke was in Marvel movies. So to my knowledge, I don't think this guy's done Marvel. He's a DC guy. Well, now that I'm thinking about it, no, it is Marvel. I think. Yeah, it is Marvel. My bad. But not Mickey Rourke, no. Similar, though, for a couple reasons. which I won't fully give away, but has to do with the story about being at the gym with Stallone and using salve, because there's a certain type of athlete that uses that type of stuff. And the nose, like the mini nose breaks. Mickey Rourke is a good one, though. I've got funny Mickey Rourke stories as well. I'm trying to think of some other ones that might be more helpful to like a general film watcher. Because I realize what might seem obvious to me is maybe not so obvious to everyone else, which is good to know. Oops, hit the tripod there. It's one of the many risks of using a full-length pencil. I keep catching my iPhone stand. Let's see. Trying to think. So the show that he really got like a big break on after he got in all that trouble was one of the most popular shows for a long time and has a bunch of spin-offs. And he was only in the first season. And was kind of one of the instrumental characters in like the whole thing sort of kicking off and having all the odd character dynamics. Honestly, I don't remember how long ago it was, but it was, for a time, directed and run by Frank Darabont, who, oddly enough, the soundtrack that I'm listening to on my headphone has a bunch of stuff from a Frank Darabont film on it. Darabont's somebody that has successfully adapted a few Stephen King things, and was one of the few people that Stephen King said that he always wrote better endings than he did personally. Like, Darabont did a better job than Stephen King did, is what he told people. He's played a lot of cops. He has been in some military stuff. He usually plays somebody who is a tough guy. I think mainly because he is actually sort of a real-life tough guy. He has... Let me make sure that's the right measurement there. He's younger than Mickey Rourke, if that helps, by like quite a bit. One of my favorite stories about him, and this might give it all away because this was on a popular show, so it's less of like a weird film podcast that I would listen to or watch. He was in a film with Tom Holland, and there's a scene where Tom Holland had to cry, and he couldn't work up the tears, and so he, before they rolled, he asked him aside from everyone, "Hey, can you slap me?" And I've heard them both tell this story. Tom Holland just told him that he slapped him. The detail that I liked is that he slapped him on the side that was opposite to the camera. He was mindful of the production, but he said, "No, I don't want to slap you. You're like my little brother. Like that, I just don't feel right about that." And then he said, "Oh, okay, all right, well, I just might need to like figure out how to get my emotions up." And as soon as he let his guard down, he slapped him as hard as he could. So he was actually crying in that scene. And if you notice when you watch that film and you see when he's crying, he's faced pretty far away from the camera because he had a big red mark on his hand or on his face. Which also, I watched that film recently, and I feel like it's pretty underrated. It was actually really, really good. I mean, it was not a happy ending, but it was a great film. off by a little margin here. So this is the woes of talking the whole time I'm drawing. Right height, wrong distance. It's all right. Honestly, I'm kind of happy because I haven't used these Blackwing erasers at all. I feel like I'm just gonna have piles of them. Not Mark Wahlberg, but I get that guess though because he was in that film with them where they were both thieves. It was more of an obscure film. I think fewer people saw it. It's on Hulu right now. I'd say like more of a stand-up dude than Wahlberg, if you know what I mean. Like more of like a kind of takes care of everybody. So this is basically what I'm doing is just measuring from, like I know the height is right because I measured that. But what usually makes a portrait go wrong, especially if you're eyeballing it, which I was getting a little lazy just talking a lot, is just getting slight measurements off. And so what I'm doing now is just moving that eye in a little bit. And then if I'm not mistaken, I think this next measurement is 28. Which I only do this in the beginning of a drawing. Hi, how's it going? I only do this in the beginning of a drawing just so I know that I'm not barking up the wrong tree the whole time. I usually don't want to fix stuff once I've already started shading and contouring. And then just so I don't end up moving another thing because I've already done 2 of those, I'm going to measure the depth of his eye. But this is also like what most commissions look like. It's just sort of shifting things around. You know, usually on a commission I'd get a different piece of paper, but I'm gonna work over that and nobody will know it was over there. Unless you spend all the time to watch the video or you're watching now. Okay, more hints. He is good friends with a canceled actor that I still like and watch, and had like a major role in him kind of doing like accountability work in public. They were also in the movies I've referenced multiple times in the last few days with someone else that I've already drawn in this series. Oh yeah, sorry, it's 7:51 p.m. where I am. These will all be archived though if you want to skim through it, and then I'll time lapse when I'm done so you can see the whole thing. Which I uploaded the Johnny Depp, Brad Pitt, and Josh Brolin time lapses today, so you can see that whole bit of progress. He's originally from DC, so he's not like an LA born sort of actor. He kind of got into it in a backwards way. Luckily his eyes are really dark, so this faint eye right here is going to be gone. Yeah, the Brad Pitt one, that's another one that's kind of, it's like a softer portrait in comparison to some of these, but I like how it turned out. All right, thanks, Donna. See you next time. This is one that must have been taken with a flash because his pupils are still not reacting to a harsh light. Flash and a high shutter speed. Let's see. I'm trying to think of other hints I can give without sort of giving the whole thing away. I also have to be mindful of not screwing it up over and over like I already have. That looks closer to the mark. This is gonna have to come in more. He's, let's see, I was referencing the show that he's on earlier that I really like. That show got really negative reviews for the 3rd season. Oh yeah, that is like the Kevin Bacon game, 7 Degrees of Separation or whatever. Which I used to crush at games like that, where it's like relate these two actors. That's my wheelhouse. Let's see. He has also worked with David Ayers, who I was talking a lot about how they get into like fistfights on set. Double check that width. This one looks like it's going to be slightly different. Just the subtle asymmetrical features of people's faces. Just slightly too wide. Usually he has a pretty thick regional accent, but not necessarily like a heavy-handed one. So like, because he has kind of a Baltimore, DC accent a little bit, that's in a lot of his stuff. And one of the last movies I watched him in, he was trying to buy a corgi and arguing with the breeder on the phone. Just kind of an odd but funny scene. He's got a little bit of a boxer's eye right here, with a sort of overlapping skin. This is always like my least favorite part of the drawing because it's so rough and loose. I kind of like the part when I get to repair it a little bit more and build in dimensions. But it's always necessary. Yeah, from looking at this, I would guess he's probably right-handed because he's got more of a boxer's eye on his left hand, or on his left eye. Yeah, they're really obscure. I'm trying not to give it all away. Like I said, he's played someone who works with superheroes but isn't personally a superhero. And works with is like a loose phrase that I'm using there. In the show that I was talking about that was kind of like his bigger break early on, he was a sheriff's deputy. I think this is going to be the same measurement. Let's double check. Yeah. And like I said, that show, he was only in the 1st season. And the guy he was playing opposite to had a great kind of odd southern accent, though he was British. Not him, but the guy he was playing with. Yeah, features instead of media references. I mean, I could give even more obvious ones. I may have to, just because I feel like I'm a cinephile, so I just know all these random things. Yeah, also like looking at the playback, I haven't really laid down enough for it to be obvious. I mean, like the nose is, I think, a little bit of a giveaway, especially with like the boxing references and things like that. This is going to be an odd sort of shading here. Also, like, I feel like it throws people off when you're looking at an eye, like an eye that doesn't have a full iris. It's a little bit like a sort of Marilyn Manson looking eye. Let me sharpen real quick. We'll start doing the eyes. Yeah. It's, I'll see how far I get down there. I'm going to work on the eyes and the nose for now. But this is another one that I'm doing that's a little bit more of a challenge because there's not many wrinkles and not any facial hair. So we'll start on the eyes and see if that starts to make him look a little bit more. And he also is one of these guys that has very little iris color. So it's just a lot of dark sort of random artifacts. Trying to think of what else. So like I said, he is actually, I think, I'm pretty sure he's a part of the Marvel universe in that character that he plays. He has acted with Michael Pena before, who's also another great one that I might draw at some point because he's like one of the most underrated comedy and drama actors. Let's see. When he was preparing to play the Marvel role that he did play, he climbed the Brooklyn Bridge. And when he was prepping for it, he went to a comic book store and the guy asked him if he was the actor he thought he was, and he said yes, and then he took half of the comics away from him and said, "Don't read these," because he wanted him to play the character true to the good comics. Do you know? If you know it, put it in there. Because I have even more stories, but I feel like they're not as fun unless you know who I'm talking about. I don't think anyone else is guessing. I mean, you and Bossatron and Nolan have been the only people that have guessed in like the last 26 days when I've done these. Was it that last hint, or was it from seeing like the eyes colored? Like getting more of the details in? Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's John Bernthal. Yeah, I think he gets like a bad rap a lot of the time because people think he's kind of a meathead, but he's actually a pretty intelligent dude. His podcast, Real Ones, is pretty fascinating. It's especially because like my wife is from Shreveport, and so uh, he has a lot of people from Shreveport where they call it like the bottoms. It's kind of like the rougher area where a lot of like the um, like gang activity happens, and he's just made friends with all these people and just rolls up with them in all these live videos because he was filming there, and I forget what it was they were actually filming, but he's literally gotten gang members who were arrested by specific officers to sit down and talk to those officers after being incarcerated, and now they're all really close friends. It's just kind of like, I don't know. He's a good figure for people to understand what public accountability should look like, because he's been pretty instrumental in a lot of that stuff. I think like sort of an old world style. But the show I was talking about is The Bear. I'm like one of the last few people that still defends that show. Um, Two of my favorite episodes of any show in the last 10 years probably are Seven Fishes and Forks, which are episodes that Forks is not his episode, but Seven Fishes is his episode. It's the Thanksgiving or Christmas, I think Christmas episode. Yeah, because it's Seven Fishes. Like I get why people didn't like The Bear season 3. It did kind of miss the mark. I think they were intentionally trying to make it different, but season 1 and 2 I think hold up really well. And then I think, are they already on to the 4th one? I feel like they've kind of like lost the plot a little bit, but there's still elements in it that I really like. But I feel like he's got that thing because he does so much theater and trained in a theater school rather than a film school, where he's able to really pull emotions from other actors really quickly, and he does that really well in those episodes. But then I was referencing Fury a bunch because I think you were the one that brought up Fury. Oh, that was Walking Dead. That's where he got his big break. He played Shane. So if he hadn't, like, if he had, gotten in trouble for knocking that guy out, and him not like going, because I think the guy was in a coma or something, but he wouldn't have been able to take that role, and he would have been incarcerated. But instead, the guy woke up, and him being on that show allowed for him to kind of fight the lawsuit with him. But also, that dude was the instigator. I mean, he was trying to take his dog. Yeah, like a lot of people forget that he was Shane. If you go back and watch the first and I think kind of only great season, because that show fell off pretty hard. Like once they parted ways with Frank Darabont, it kind of went to crap. Frank Darabont also is who made Shawshank Redemption and, if I'm not mistaken, The Mist, which like are two of the ones that Stephen King was saying somebody adapted what he did and did a better job on the ending. I think also how they adapted like Shawshank, not that it's a Bernthal story, but in Shawshank, if you read the actual, I think it's a short story, or I don't know if you'd consider it like a novella or what, I don't know the page count, but if you read that, it makes all the guys he's imprisoned with way less likable. And so I think Darabont did the right thing so you could actually feel endeared to the characters more. Like Red, as an example, Morgan Freeman's character, once you find out what he did in the book, it is awful. So it's kind of a, like, I feel like Darabont has a good sense of how to make people more endearing in film and TV, and him running Walking Dead I think was the right choice. That's why I also see like a lot of the people that are in Frank Darabont films in that first season. which is kind of what drew me to it, because I don't really dig zombie stuff all that much. It's kind of played out. That said, I do like World War Z a lot, but I don't know, it's not traditional zombies. So I'm kind of just like rough shaping some stuff here, because I'm going to have to go in and refine quite a bit. I think you're familiar with this, but just for the folks that are new to watching, or anyone that finds it in the archive. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's a fan of The Mist. It's one of the other ones, because I think we were talking about horror films and things like that. That's one of the few scary movies that I like as well. And that ending is horrifying, and also Stephen King said that it was so much better than what he wrote. And I agree, it is better. Like, way more tragic and awful. So better in the sense that it felt more like, almost like Stephen King had a hand in it, but I'm pretty sure that was Frank Darabont who did that. And then the guy that I was talking about, the canceled actor that he helped like with accountability, was Shia LaBeouf, because they were in Fury together, and so he was kind of attached to him for a while. And then on his podcast, Real Ones, he had Shia LaBeouf on there. Which I think, like, I don't know, more people should be looking at that episode of that podcast is interesting. It used to only be on his Patreon, and if you look at the comments, there's like 250 comments the day it came out about people like really struggling with sobriety and being really inspired by it. Public accountability, instead of just like dumping someone in the trash, I think has a lot more of like a positive impact long term. But it's stuff like that. Not that we should all be modeling our lives after actors and stuff, but it's like when people call for like immediate cancellations, it's like, well, I don't know, maybe like they should be more publicly accountable in that sense, instead of just losing money and getting trashed when they go in public. Yeah, so like the crazy thing with The Mist is that the ending in the book versus the movie is that the movie's darker. Like, Darabont thought it would hit harder if it was reshaped that way. And I think that's like one of the rare times that Stephen King didn't write the most horrifying thing, but in Shawshank it definitely was, because it's like, I don't know if anyone wants me to say all this stuff, but like Red, Morgan Freeman's character, you want to love him in the film. You don't want any of these guys to be bad, but Red cut the brake line on his wife's car in the book, and then his kids ended up being in it. And so it's this like horrifying thing. So it makes all those scenes when he goes in front of the parole board very different, because it's painted as if he like was a robber, and basically he was mad because his wife didn't want him to gamble and drink anymore and was sick of fighting with her. And so it's just this like horrible thing. But when they worked the script of Shawshank, they knew that nobody would want to root for that character or feel any like emotional stuff towards him if that was what his backstory was. And like Hayward, all those guys there, it's all really dark stuff. I mean, obviously they're in prison for life, so it's like, it makes sense, but it does make it harder to tell a story where you want to feel any kind of attachment to those characters. But yeah, it is very much Stephen King. I mean, like, that is, it's very much, there's just, no, I don't know, like that story in particular, because I love that movie. I think a lot of people do. Imagine if those details were in the movie, would people still love Red and Hayward and all those guys? Same with like Brooks. Like Brooks, I'm pretty sure, it's been a long time since I've read it, but Brooks was like a robber that I think had a thing go horribly wrong and was pretty violent. But that was kind of like the picture they were trying to paint, is that he was so institutionalized that he was basically a different person because he just was so young when it happened. But yeah, Darabont, I can't remember the exact ending in The Mist and the story, but in the film, it's, if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. That one is awful, and that's when Tom Jane is playing the character, and man, is it rough. Yeah, I'll have to check out Dark Tower. I mean, like, it's been enough time where I don't associate it with that terrible bass player that I was talking about. He just kept, like, telling me I had to read it. It's like, okay, yeah, okay, guy, thanks. I felt more like, how about you sing in key and stop complaining about driving? So sort of like the woes of being in a touring band when you don't get along with some of the players. So it's hard to take like a book recommendation. But yeah, it's been a long time, and I'm overdue for that one. But yeah, there's something about like when a director really gets the writer and they don't want to step on what they've done, but they find that it's an improvement and it actually does work like that. I feel like Darabont's one of the rare guys that actually does that successfully. But even like half of the cast from Walking Dead said that they were kind of over it once Darabont got pushed out. And in an interview with, I can't remember the actress's name, but I think her name's Lori. It's a sort of love triangle, like the mom of the kid and the baby that was with his partner. Like his partner's wife, basically, that he ends up like being with, like when they think that he's gone. She did his podcast, and they talked about how like what a change it was when Darabont was pushed out and some of the actors were gone. I feel like that show in general was like built on shock value instead of quality after that. All right. Well, I probably am not going to go too much longer since that first stream crashed, because I think I was at just over an hour and a half there, and I'm past an hour and a half here, so I've already gone longer than I normally do. But so far, that is the start of it. For anyone that's new to watching things, it starts really rough and then ends up pretty photoreal by the end of it. But I'll be back on tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll be drawing every day for the next 9 days at that time. These all get archived, so if you want to come and watch the whole thing back or skim through them, you can. And then usually a couple days after I finish these, I'll post a time lapse so you can see the whole progress and or the whole process in 10 seconds. But yeah, so I finished Christian Bale and then started this one, which is John Bernthal. So nice talking with everybody. Thanks for watching. I will hopefully see some of y'all tomorrow, or you'll see what I'm doing tomorrow, and you'll hear me ramble. So thanks again. Later, Travis.